but Rand Paul's striking an interesting note. If you believe that there's too much similarity in issues like, well, let's say Common Core or immigration between someone like a Jeb Bush and someone like a Hillary, then someone like a Rand Paul is interesting, right? Then obviously the foreign policy angle is far different. And Rand Paul runs into a buzzsaw of criticism for past statements that he made about Israel and some on foreign aid. But when you look at these polls that are done about threats to America and the deployment of U.S. forces, foreign aid, I mean, Rand Paul can, I think, accurately say that his view is probably closer to the majority view in the country than Jeb Bush's or, perhaps Hillary Clinton's. So what will he do with that? How far will he get with that? First of all, on Rand Paul, where do you put him in the conservative pantheon right now, given where the public's mindset is and the war weariness and the distrust of Washington in general?
I think he's tapping into something. Obviously, I don't agree with him on foreign policy, and he may be closer to where the public is than I am. I mean, no, I don't. That's not, for me, the fundamental issue in foreign policy. It's what's good for the country. I think what you said earlier is right, in that he is closer to Republicans and conservatives on some issues than a Jeb Bush or a Mitt Romney, and I'm with him on some of those issues. On immigration, he's tougher-minded. On Common Core, he's probably pretty good. He's just more skeptical of the federal government in general. On foreign policy, I think the critique of Rand Paul, and it's a substantive issue, not really a political name-calling issue, is his foreign policy would be a lot like President Obama's, I think, if anything, a little more restrained. There's a case to be made for that. It's not a case I agree with, though, and I think it needs to be thoroughly debated. I don't agree with some of my friends who want to excommunicate Rand Paul, but I also don't agree with Rand Paul when he sort of tries to avoid, I think, substantive debate by saying, well, someone else is a warmonger, or if you're for bombing the hell out of ISIL, then somehow you're for sending 200,000 troops back to Iraq.
Right. Well, I'm extremely skeptical about getting involved in another Middle Eastern boots on the ground engagement. However, I do also think that this Islamic State is something to be reckoned with, and I think doing nothing, and that's kind of where I am in this. Doing nothing is just not an option. I mean, we might want to do nothing, and I get that, but unfortunately, events have slapped Obama and I think this country in the face. And you could say we helped create the Islamic State. That's what Peter Hitchens came on the show last week, Bill, and he said, I'm just not going to spend a lot of time on this because we're always told that this is the biggest threat and this is the threat and we got to get involved. And he's like, who created this? Why did this start? Why did this mess in the Middle East start in this fever pitch that it is in now? And he directly blames British and American involvement in Iraq. So I get that, but I think this deal is something that we cannot turn away from.
Look, intellectuals overthink things. You know what? We allied with Stalin in World War II and helped create, the captivity of Eastern Europe. You could argue, and plausibly argue, for 4 decades. We got involved in Afghanistan to bring down the Soviet Union, probably helped create indirectly some of what came about in Afghanistan in the 90s and led to 9/11. That's life. Maybe we could have been cleverer in all these cases, but often when you mess around in the real world, you have unintended effects, and some of them are bad. But I agree with you. This is not the time. I mean, it's an interesting intellectual exercise, but at the end of the day, we have this group of fanatical jihadists rampaging through the Middle East, that you're setting up a real state with real money and real assets, who are going to kill a ton of people over there and kill as many Americans as they can when they get to that. So, and they're getting to it already for the ones they've captured over there. So, I do think we're underestimating the ability, what some use of force, even from the air, with I think some people on the ground to help out. How much that could do? You were on Fox News Sunday yesterday. I was on this week. I'm glad we're, sharing the labor here of trying to enlighten people around the country. And someone said on the panel with me, we can't just bomb. I mean, we have to really think about this and have a long debate and discussion. You know what? Why don't we know where ISIS is. What's the harm of bombing them, at least, for a few weeks and seeing what happens? I don't think there's much in the way of unanticipated side effects that are going to be bad there. We could kill a lot of very bad guys. And the Washington Post yesterday had an amazing front page story we're going on about, it's a little hard to find the leaders, and therefore we've been hesitant to launch bombing raids on terror camps and training areas for ISIL because we're not sure the leaders are still there when we would bomb them. Well, if the leaders weren't there, we would destroy an ISIL terror camp and a bunch of terrorists anyway. So what's so terrible about that? I have a sort of some slightly simple-minded view of this, that when you deal with an organization like this, the main thing they have to learn is that their lives are in danger, that they're not going to win, that they're at high risk of, in fact, being killed. I think that would deter a lot of the recruits. As bin Laden said, the strong people have flocked to the strong horse in the Middle East. And I think we could do a lot more than we're doing without, getting involved with 200,000 troops on the ground.